Welcome to Game Changers. Today's guest is a true pioneer in India's gaming industry, Nitish Mittersain, founder and CEO of Nazara Technologies. Nitish is someone who's not only seen the rise of gaming in India, he's helped build it from the ground up. Over the last 2 decades, he's navigated multiple technology waves, and under his leadership, Nazara has grown into a diversified gaming powerhouse as India's only publicly listed gaming company, now reaching over 100 million users across 100 countries. Nitish, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thank you, Jason. Looking forward to this chat.
All right, Nitish, I like to start with a very easy question. Can you just take us back to your origin story with gaming? What is the first game you remember playing that meant something to you?
Absolutely. It was a game that was launched in 1983 when I was 4 or 5 years old on Atari called SeaQuest. It was you played like a submarine shooting all types of fish. And I think I did pretty well because I got a letter from the Atari CEO then, which I still have, congratulating me for my score.
Is that framed in your office somewhere or at home? Where's this letter?
It's lying around somewhere in my desk.
All right, we got to get that in the office. I think that's a pretty memorable moment. All right. So you started, to my understanding, Nazara when you were 19 years old.
That's right.
What led you to think that was a good idea? Did you finish college? What did your family and friends think? Did they think you were crazy? What led you to start it?
Sure. I came from a traditional textile manufacturing business family in Mumbai. Like I mentioned, I got into gaming at a very young age. I started coding games at 7 on a ZX Spectrum. And, that really became my life and my passion. That's all I was interested in doing. And I was fiddling around with technology as the internet came into India in the early to mid 90s. And eventually I thought that, gaming would become a good business opportunity in India at some point of time. And this was way back in 97, 98, 99. I was maybe 19, 20 years old and probably a bit naive, right? I didn't realize that I was a decade or too early for the market. So yeah, that's how I really started Nazara. And my family was always extremely supportive. That's why I was able to really get going. I did college in Mumbai. 5 years of college, I attended all of 8 lectures. So that was, the maximum achievement in college. But I was already doing a lot of stuff with Nazara and other things at that point of time.
All right, Nitish, help us frame your family a little bit better. Are you, an only child? Are you one of many? Are you the only one in gaming? Did everyone else go to textiles? Help us frame your family situation.
Yes, sure. I have a younger sister who's not in gaming, but my dad was extremely supportive. He was an engineer by education, and he actually mentored me and also became the chairman of Nazara. She has been for the last 2 decades. So he's been a very strong support as well. Of course, mothers are always a support, right? Irrespective of whatever you do or you do not.
Well, that's amazing that he ended up joining the company, and maybe we can use this as a recruiting tool for your sister to finally join gaming and leave whatever industry she's chosen to be in. So try to get the whole family involved.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So you've often been cited to me as a champion of gaming in India. And, if not the champion of gaming in India, believing it about, as you said, a couple decades actually before most people paid really any significant attention to the region. What fueled your conviction? Was it just the love for games? Did you see and say, no, there's an opportunity here in India that is unique compared to other markets that at that time had formalized and more formative gaming scenes?
It's a really interesting paradox because when I started, the infrastructure for gaming or even the cultural background for gaming was very limited in India because people really didn't have access in the 80s or 90s consoles or PCs at their home to be able to experience gaming, right? But at the same time, when I saw in college, a lot of my friends really enjoy gaming, talk about gaming. And I knew that India had generally a, young demographic. My business genes, because I come from a business family, felt that gaming would become an opportunity in India in the years or decades to come, uh, without doubt. And that's how I really started as India's first gaming company way back in 98, 99. If, of course, it's been a long journey and we have, pivoted many times over. to be able to get to where we are today. I think we have an equally long but very exciting journey ahead of us.
And what do you think is interesting? Obviously, you started this company when you were quite young, right? You were, legitimately a teenager when you started Nazara. You've now been the CEO for over 2 decades. You have a lot of experience. If you're going to go back to let's call it that 19-year-old self when you started Nazara, what would you want to tell him that you wish you had known when you started this company? And probably at the time you had no idea how big it would get. You probably had very little aspirations of ever being a public company. You know, what would you want to go counsel yourself? Maybe what would you have done differently to the journey that you got to here at the end where you are now?
Sure. I think personally, I would have tried to hold on to more equity. As a young entrepreneur, I diluted early, monetization of stuff at that point of time. Perhaps hindsight is, 2020. But personally, that's something I would have been a bit more careful about. In terms of business, I think largely we followed good practices. We focused on what I call real metrics versus vanity metrics. We've been a little old school when it comes to cash flows and profitability. I think we've done fairly well on those aspects. Perhaps a little bit more risk taking appetite. The company was born and I became an entrepreneur in 98, 99, just ahead of the dot com bust. And I think 2, 3, 4 years were quite a bit of a struggle in that 2000, 2003 period, which also scarred us to a certain extent and made us more conservative. So I think at certain points in our of time timeline, if we would have taken slightly larger risks, maybe we would have been ahead of where we are today. But we have no complaints. I think we're in a very good position today. We are India's only listed gaming company, over $1 billion in market cap, generating quarter on quarter growth, revenues, profitability, good credibility. I think we have this great foundation laid, on top of which we can build a lot more now.
And we're going to dive into kind of the meteoric growth you guys have experienced, especially over the last year. But I want to dive into really kind of the origins of what Nazara was initially, which was to be a games company. And obviously, you guys have evolved into doing quite a few different things now beyond just, I'd say, traditional gaming, right? You guys are starting to really branch out to being a multimedia conglomerate, is the word I would use. So maybe talk about what the original vision for the start of the company is, and then maybe talk through a couple of the pivotal moments where things changed. And you highlighted 2003. I can think of a few of myself, but I would love for you to kind of take us through that journey to 2025 of what were those kind of pivotal moments.
So I think, we right at the start of the bat, we were building a India themed, casual, flash based gaming destination or website, I would say, right? It was Nazara.com. And the whole idea was to attract eyeballs and monetize through advertising, just like the good old .com days. So that was really where we started with. Through the .com crash, we realized that's not going to make us any money. And India had very few internet users with reasonable bandwidth at that point of time. So we started in 2004, 2005 making games for the mobile phones and working with the mobile carriers in India. It actually started just with SMS games, text-based games on trivia, etc., where we would get a certain royalty on every text that was sent by the user to our platform. But that was the first time we really started monetizing gaming. And then you had the J2ME phones come in, like the Nokia Series 60, etc. So we started making games for that platform and monetizing through the telco channels or the telco billing, right? Which was the easy way to bill in India because people really were not using credit cards for micropayments. There was no other way to really collect micropayments. So the telco channel was really the only real way you could monetize. In 2007, 2008, we kind of invented or pivoted into a subscription based model. Think of it like a Netflix for mobile gaming that was delivered to the mobile carriers, which then sold it to the end consumer that they had. And this started working very well for us in India. After we started monetizing that, we kind of took it to about 150 telcos in over 50 countries. And from 2007 to 2014, we largely did that, but we actually ran it extremely well. We had a mantra of the famous Muhammad Ali quote, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. We would operate extremely lightweight, lean and mean team, 40, 50% profit margins. And we made, I think in those years, we made like $30 million of cash. We had raised very little capital in 2005 from a VC firm here in India called Westbridge Capital. And that's all we raised only $3 million. But by 2014, we found ourselves sitting on maybe 30-40 million dollars of cash generated from this telco based business. So I think that was the progress we really did from 2000 all the way to 2014.
And maybe before you go on to the next, let's just talk about two things here really quick. One is I think you're highlighting the importance of your telco relationships. And, as someone myself who spent significant time outside the US as a kid, I understand the lifeblood of your telco, right? And so that was really interesting of how you decided to kind of work side by side and try to stay at the hip with the telco. Maybe try to explain that for an audience that maybe doesn't understand why that is so pivotal, especially in let's call it a non-US market. Why the telco was so pivotal for you to partner with.
Sure. The telco owned the customer access, right? The last mile to the customer. And let's say in a country of India where in those years you would have, let's say, 100 million consumers or 200 million consumers on the mobile phone, and you wanted to build, provide them digital services and bill them, let's say, 10 rupees or 20 rupees, which is like, let's say, 10 cents or 20 cents in a month. There was no other way to collect that money except for really billing them on their mobile phone bill or their prepaid card. And for that, the telco was really the gateway. You had to partner with the telcos and they would give you access to their billing systems. And then they would collect all the money from the 10 million or 100 million consumers and then pay you your share. Of course, they were very stingy in what they would pay. They would like keep 80% and pay you 20%. But nevertheless, the numbers added up. And for a small company, it wasn't bad, right? It was never easy working with telcos because it's a small company versus really these giants, right? Which we should have a lot of filters. But I think we got the knack of working and then we could really expand that across especially many emerging markets. We went from India to the Indian subcontinent, then to the Middle East, to Africa, to the East from where we are. So I think we really spread it well. But it did another thing for us in those years. It really made Nazara's think global. And I think since then, we don't think ourselves as just an Indian company or just focusing on the Indian consumer. We do think ourselves as a global company. And which is why even how we are evolving today in the last 5 years or 3 years, you will see ourselves evolving more like a global platform versus just a India focused platform.
Do you think, and I don't know if this came to mind when you were talking, everyone's complained obviously about the app store fees, the 30%, and you just highlighted sort of a reverse of that, the 80% fee. And you were managed to make those numbers work and actually produce some significant free cash flow. All I could think about is, I feel like very few people know how good they have it, where they're not having to sacrifice 80% of revenue. So hats off to you for pulling that off. I want to hone in on also a moment. You said you produced around $30 million in free cash. You're sitting there, this is roughly about 15, 16 years after you started the company. Very logical question. Okay, do I just want to take this cash off the table, live a very comfortable life? But that wasn't the decision you made. What motivated you to want to keep building? What made you decide I don't want to go join a country club and play tennis or golf the rest of my life? What made you want to keep going?
Yeah, I think it's just about being in a state of flow, right? It's what you enjoy doing. And even today, I was like for the last 3-4 years trying to contemplate what the future lies for Nazara, for me. And just last GDC, when I was there in March, standing outside of W Hotel, outside the Moscow Center, it just struck me, that this is really, what I enjoy in terms of what I do. I've done it for so long. This is probably also the only thing I know how to do, except for playing the saxophone pretty poorly. So I didn't know what else I would do, and even that's true for today, right? So I think it's really just being in the flow of what you enjoy.
If I'd known you played the saxophone, I would have made sure that was part of the intro music. So we'll work on that for our second and repeat podcast. Okay, so 2014, you guys are sitting there, you have 30 million in cash. What was the next move? What was the strategic move for you guys as a company that took you into the back half of the 20 teens?
I think two things. With the advent of Android phones, especially kind of, filtering into the emerging markets, our traditional model of the telco gaming club subscription clearly seemed to be threatened. We felt consumers would simply go on Google Play and download games for free versus go to their telcos. And we saw that that business would decline, which was like 99% of our revenues. So we were sitting on one side facing a very obvious decline in our traditional telco gaming business. The On the other hand, I was itching to go back to what I would say real core gaming, right? This had become more of an aggregator business and with maybe some technology wrapped over it and more of a distribution play. But for me, gaming meant a lot more. And I wanted to, really go back to that. The third thing is over the decade and a half, I had realized that gaming can be a fast changing, disruptive business. And in my mind, I wanted to build a much more stable, diversified platform that was diversified by geography. It was diversified by product or the demographics of the user it targeted, and also diversified by the business model we operated, right? And therefore, I wanted to have this kind of platform that was, uh, if I were to call it a stable ship in a stormy sea, which could take advantage of opportunities when disruption arose. And I think that was quite clear in my mind. So we started in 2014-15 thinking, okay, we have this cash in our bank, and what should we really do? And then we started identifying trends that we wanted to get into, what we saw around us. So, for example, we thought esports is a mega trend. The youth would really eventually get attracted to it. We saw gaming, or I would say edu gaming or healthy content for young kids becoming important because kids would consume digital content and parents wanted to make sure that the content was healthy. Just give you a couple of examples. We identified mega trends we wanted to operate in. And then we were thinking of doing products in those verticals. But sitting here in India, being a small industry, we realized that in each of the verticals we had kind of identified, there were already some fantastic teams doing some good work over there. For example, there was an app right here made in Mumbai called Kidopia, which was doing like $2-3 million a year in revenue, mostly from the US market. And we saw that there was a lot of customer love for that app. So we kind of then evolved into a thinking saying, rather than us trying to reinvent the wheel, why don't we create a platform where we can kind of partner with these great teams and founders and products and bring them all onto one platform? And how can we make 1 plus 1 more than 2? Can we make it 3, 4, 5, or 11, right? And with that concept or with that thinking, we eventually emerged with what we call the Friends of Nazara strategy, where we started, acquiring majority stakes in these companies, but running them in a very decentralized manner, making sure that the founders had a lot of, independence to work, but we supported them either with capital, network, our own skill sets in terms of user acquisition, etc. Because on the telco side, we had operated in a lot of, I would say, low ARPU markets and very competitively. So we had learned certain skill sets on the subscription side. For different companies, we brought different kind of, I would say, plugged in different gaps. And if nothing else, we kind of just focused on core basics like focus on real metrics versus vanity metrics, focus on profitable growth versus growth at all costs. And some of these things helped some of these younger startups. So I think that's how this whole Friends of Nazara decentralized approach kind of kicked off. And to our partners' delight, we saw that many of these companies became very successful together. So they kind of 10x or 20x, within 2-3 years of us doing that acquisition. Most credit to the teams, but we did contribute a little bit, and I think that emboldened us to take the next step on that strategy. Of course, we made mistakes, we learned along the way, we kept fine tuning and tweaking, and that's a lifelong process, right? You always keep doing it. But that's kind of the path we went down. And eventually IPO'd the company in 2021, uh, quite successfully here in India. We became the first gaming company to list in India. There was a lot of apprehension whether the markets would understand. And we had a false start in 2018. But in 2021, in the mix of COVID, I think the timing was perfect. And we had a 175 times oversubscription. So I think that was a great outcome for us in
Did you
2020.
say 170 times oversubscription?
That's right.
Man, you're putting the Figma IPO to shame. I know that was oversubscribed, but I know it wasn't 170 times oversubscribed. What drove that? What drove that demand? Was it primarily driven by Indian institutional investors? Was it global institutional investors? What was it?
I think it helps by being the first to the market. We were a unique story. We were backed by some very strong local investors who are highly reputed, which attracted a lot of, Indian and global investors. And we were running a profitable business. I think Indian markets and Indian investors especially still like to see profitable companies. So I think all of that came together along with the good timing. I think COVID, uh, we IPO'd in March of 2021. It was like, a year after COVID started. And I think just that timing, gaming was hot at that point of time. So it was a combination of many things.
I think profitability is back in fashion, Nitish. I think everyone lost their minds in 2020, 2021, and then 2022 was a hard reckoning year for many people. So I think your practice and prudence has probably served you quite well over the last couple of years. And so I think you're in good company pursuing the strategy that you are. Um, just a level set for the audience. Nazara is a $1.5 billion market cap. They're up about 50% year over year, 38% year to date. They trade about 8x rev, which is just slightly above kind of the mean for a lot of gaming comps. I want to ask you a couple questions around your strategy for growth. You guys have been on a very active acquisition spree. You highlighted a few of those names here recently, and you've raised about, these aren't perfect numbers because I'm converting to dollars, but 220 million roughly in the last 2-3 years. Talk us through organic growth, which was kind of your strategy, I think, until about 2017 or 2018. And then 2018 on has been not only, but largely a growth through acquisition. Why did you flip the switch to that? And let's just talk through the couple of those acquisitions and how they've gone.
I think our friends of Nazara strategy, which I described earlier, started coming along and fitting together very well in those years. And we could see that we were able to add a lot more value in helping a company or a studio, a good business go from 1 to 10 versus investing a lot of our time and energy in creating 0 to 1 startups or, opportunities. And we realized, everyone's competency is different, but we were really good at that aspect of accelerating businesses. Once they already achieved some level of product market fit. It also allowed us to empanel or onboard fantastic teams of founders and managements, which perhaps we could not hire very easily. So we were able to build this A team of rock stars, doing diverse work on this platform, and also achieve our goal of being a diverse platform, which I spoke about earlier as well. So this kind of really made sense for us. And with our ability to raise capital in India, Indian markets are pretty deep. We believe Indian markets are, we have 2 decades of growth ahead of us. So there's a lot of room to keep going over here. Ability to raise capital and tap into great IPs and opportunities globally was very attractive to us. And that's what we have been doubling down, especially in the last couple of years, as you've seen. We've built strong momentum, and we're hoping only to kind of triple down on that this year, next year, and the year ahead of us.
And if my memory serves me correctly, you have acquired companies in Europe, you've acquired companies in the US. You're looking across the globe and highlighting kind of your global strategy you said earlier. What markets are you most excited about yourself to acquire companies? What are regions where you get, if your corp dev team brings it to you, you perk up a little bit because you say that's an opportunity. Where are the geos that you want to expand your influence more? And let's talk through maybe some of the regions at the end that you're also a little disinterested by, where you don't really pay attention to at Nazara.
We have a dual strategy at this point of time. One is, of course, our home market, which is India. Just to speak a little bit about it, we have over 500 million, gamers today, mostly on mobile phones. And they have India's been a mobile first country. So most of the gamers have been, casual in nature, playing casual games, tweeting around games propensity to pay has been relatively low, but it's increasing. And I think in the next 5 years, India will emerge as one of the most exciting scaled up gaming markets in terms of revenues as well. Today, if you see on your Google or Apple charts, India is usually ranking at number one or number two in terms of downloads, but usually does not even rank in the top 10 in terms of revenues. But I think you will start seeing India creep up slowly, 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 and get to top 10, top 5, top 3. I have no doubt about that. And therefore, what we are doing in India is developing the ecosystem, very actively investing in a lot of startups. And now we've launched something called Nazara Publishing, which are partnering a lot of global companies to be their bridge into India, etc. Right. So we're doing a lot of work in India, and we continue to be very excited about our own home market. That said, of course, I think monetization, we have to be patient in India. You can't force it, and we have been patient. We'll continue to be patient for as long as it takes. In the meanwhile, we've seen great opportunity globally, really fantastic teams that we've been able to partner with. And in recent years, also, I think the valuations, etc., have been in a zone that are very compelling. So I think that's been a strong focus area for us. Mostly, I would say westward from India. So European markets and North American markets have been very exciting for us at this point of time. I think another market that's been on our radar definitely is the Middle East, where we see very interesting opportunities we can extend to from India. We haven't done a lot of work in the Far East, Japan, it's South Korea, etc. Those markets are culturally very different. India is a very westward English speaking country. So for us to work in Europe or the West, or like the US or North America, is far easier than, the Eastern markets. Africa is an interesting India-like market, but I would say still many years away from where India is. So that's one market I think we are a bit slow at this point of time.
One of the things that I found interesting about your strategy is obviously in India over the last, let's call it 6 to 7 years, there's been a lot of waves and companies that have raised money in real money gaming. And I know this is a small portion of your business. This is not a major and core portion of your business. But I would love to hear your perspective as an operator, especially with in 2023, there was an infamous GST tax that was rolled out by the Indian government that nearly killed many of these businesses or did kill. I know that has been stayed by the Supreme Court here in January 2025. I would like to hear your response to this. What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, when they got that news in January 25, I looked at your stock. It jumped about 9%, I think, overnight. It was, great momentum for everyone in India. What is your perspective on this as an operator? What do you think that the 2023 tax was trying to accomplish? And obviously, the staying that happened here in 2025 seems like only but good news for not only for Nazara, but for all of Indian gaming.
So I think for context, right, for your audience, in India, the only really scaled up monetization model in gaming has been the real money gaming, where you, pay money and win money. And in terms of the government's approach to that, it's been kind of a gray area where it's operating over many years. Indian regulation says that if it's a game of skill or predominantly skill, it is not gambling. And I think that's under what all these real money gaming companies have operated over the last many years. Nazara was generally conservative because we were a bit skeptical of playing in the gray area, and we didn't want to take on a lot of potential regulatory challenges, which eventually played out, and which is why we actually stayed out of it for really long, despite that business scaling up dramatically. And quite often we felt kind of, that perhaps we missed the boat or we've left behind, and our investors reminded us every quarter after we went public so that we don't forget about it. But yeah, but we were a bit conservative on our approach. Now, this 23 GST was a big surprise. Not only did the government significantly increase the taxation on the real money gaming companies, initially the announcement was to increase the tax 10x, which would, decapitate all the companies, if I would, really say what it meant. But the industry was able to lobby, and the government saw it correctly and kind of still reduced it to about a 4x increase. But that's still took away profits for most companies, and the small to mid companies really have disappeared. It kind of put a full stop on any additional investments coming into these companies. So that's gone on for the last 18 months or so. Most of the companies have disappeared, but the larger companies actually become bigger. So the market leaders have actually been able to use this opportunity to strengthen their business, work alongside or optimize for this tax and still start becoming profitable again. And because of lower competition, they've actually been able to grow bigger, right? So the smaller players disappear, the bigger got bigger. That's really what's happened in that space. What Nazara did was, while we were sitting on the fence last year, we took a big bet, probably our biggest bet till date, in India's largest online gaming platform called PokerBaazi, which is largest poker platform with a 70% market dominance. We were able to get it at an attractive valuation because of this retrospective tax, which we hope will be resolved one way or the other going forward. Again, for your audience, the current retrospective claims from 2017 are in the region of 20 to $30 billion on the gaming companies in India. And it's interesting we speak today because just today, after maybe months of hearing, the Supreme Court has just finally resolved the order, which means they will announce the judgment in the next 2 or 3 months, but all the hearing and debate is over. So we're all excited to see what turns out. And I think government will take a fair view on this picture. The court should take a fair view. We're very optimistic of the outcome. But now Nazara's very well poised in that sector as well. Until this PokerBaazi move, we were kind of out of that game. But I think I would say we are back in that game as of now.
Do you think that we expect to see more acquisitions by Nazara in this space, especially with more clarity around the news from the Supreme Court?
I think one of the reasons we also took this acquisition last year was because the government had defined the going forward taxation quite clearly. So the only fly in the ointment was the retrospective tax, but at least going forward was clear, which made us a bit more comfortable. We will take definitely like to grow our business there, but I think now we will wait for this Supreme Court clarity before any new move in that space.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think about over the last 6, 7 years since we founded our firm, the amount of gaming companies that we've been pitched in the touch real money gaming or skill based gaming that come from India has dominated, I think, the deal flow from the region. And so it's also fascinating to see the way that tax has been used to honestly stifle startups, right? That's the consequence that's happened, which probably was not the intention of the government at the time, but is the result nonetheless. The result was probably not what was intended.
Yeah, no, I was saying, look, in any new business which is not regulated, it goes through that evolution, and the industry, the government have to work together, go through these ups and downs. I think that's what you're seeing in this sector till it will eventually stabilize.
Understood. All right. Let's go forward here. You've highlighted a few different categories you guys are focused on. I thought one thing that I saw that was interesting to me was that you guys are actually looking at things that are also outside of your traditional gaming, real money gaming, with funky monkey play centers. Also, the name, I have to love it. These are physical entertainment spaces. That seems very different than what you've typically considered as part of your core business. Can you talk to me through what's the driving thesis for in-person gaming for you all?
Yeah, I think for now, it's a India first strategy that we are operating, where we believe two, three mega trends are coming together to make it a very fascinating opportunity. One is, of course, like everywhere in the world, the youngsters and the youth are more, kind of submerged into their devices. And therefore, there's a general sense of isolation. And therefore, once in a while, people do want to go out into social, interactive, entertainment and experiences. And I think the share of wallet that the youngsters are willing to pay for that is significant. In a country like India, it's rising very rapidly. So we believe that it's a market that's going to really swing very high. Generally, with the country's GDP growing, it's also, perhaps you could do this in 8 cities in India 20 years back. Today, you can do it in 50 cities. Maybe in another 5, 10 years, you'll be able to do it in 500 cities. There's just this massive scale of operations that can be expanded into is huge. And third is we believe that in a lot of our online partnerships, we can kind of translate into some of these physical experiences and physical centers, including our own IP, for example, Kidopia, or also our third party licenses. For example, today in Kidopia, we're working with a Mattel or a Hasbro. Some of these partnerships can potentially transcend into physical location. I think it's a mix of things why we wanted to give this a shot. And again, it's through our decentralized approach where we have a fantastic team of founders and management running it. So it doesn't really take too much of a bandwidth at this point of time.
It's interesting when you started Nazara, the world was dominated by, let's call it, in-person interaction. Throughout the development of Nazara, it's definitely skewed more and more towards digital interaction with other people. And you're now seeing this kind of callback of people wanting both. What do you think is driving that? Maybe just globally, and then maybe specifically, if there's anything that is specific to the Indian market you would like to highlight that you think is causing this callback to, we want to be in person, we want to spend time together with people we know or just with other people we don't know.
Yeah, I think it's increasingly it's isolation and loneliness, right? The Instagrams of the world hook you, and you're in it all the time. And kids are on Fortnite and all, and it's not a bad thing. That's fine. But I think the more people are submerged into the digital world, the more they want to once in a while reconnect. Human beings are like that, right? At some point of time, you need that human connect. I think, for example, movies is a great example. Movies are a one-way kind of consumption pattern. Right? You may go to the movie theater, but you will still be watching the movie, and uh, that's increasingly losing popularity. Let's say in a place like India. Whereas the social entertainment platforms are becoming more popular, whether it's online, for example, Fortnite or Roblox, or whether it's offline. I think generally this move towards interactive social platforms are going to increasingly become more popular, is what we feel.
Yeah, the pandemic of loneliness, I think, has hit pretty much every market that has a significant percentage of its youth online, right? And it is interesting to see more and more companies start to pivot to expand it to offer both. It's something that I talk about a lot is wanting to experience. I preach temperance. Fortnite's great in moderation. Instagram can be good. I personally don't use Instagram. Can be good in temperance. But I think we're seeing this desire as humans that we weren't meant to only live in a digital world. We are also meant to live in the physical world. All right, Nitish. Obviously, I want to start wrapping this up, but I want to ask you a question of you as a CEO today, lead a public company. You have to have people that you look to for inspiration, whether you know them personally or not. Who are some other leaders in business and gaming, entertainment, or other industries that you sort of looked at as a North Star that you want to emulate? And if you could become like them, you would. Who are some of those individuals?
I think more than specific individuals, I'm very fascinated by stories of, especially because we are so acquisitive, stories of, where entrepreneurs have really taken very aggressive steps or aggressive positions, and really been able to swing it. Because I know when we look at a lot of opportunities, and we are always looking at opportunities, to think a lot, and you really have to sometimes be very bold to be able to swing it. For example, deals like Instagram by Facebook or Meta, one point of time were very large transactions, but on WhatsApp, for example, such a small team, right? But it's played out so well. So I think I'm always attracted to those stories of how a visionary entrepreneur has been able to pivot the business or evolve the business by a large, bold bet.
I love it, and I hope that you get the next WhatsApp as part of the Nazara uh, 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 the friends of Nazara. And I'll let you close out, Nitish. Maybe just with if there are any operators that are building, any encouragement you would want to share with them, and then also maybe any highlights you would say of why they should potentially come chat with you or your team about joining the Nazara platform. I'll leave it there for you to speak into.
Yeah, sure. Life's lesson I can share from my 25 years of experience is what I've kind of condensed 25 years of work experience running Nazara into what I call the three P's, which is pursue your passion. As long as you're doing these three P's over a fairly long period of time, I'm very sure that every founder and every professional would be extremely successful. So it's really, for me, it's about pursuing your passion, which is your first P. The second is being able to persevere through all the difficult moments and still survive and still get back to what you're doing. And the third is what I believe is the most underrated superpower, which is just simply being positive to in everything you do. Just as an example, Nazara over 2 decades has nearly zero litigation history because we just generally have good intent besides anything else. So I think for me these three things have worked very well, and I hope anyone who uses them or focuses on them can be very successful as well.
Nitish, I love the mantra. I love the three. And thank you so much for joining us, Nitish. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot about Nazara. I hope our audience does as well. And as I mentioned before, Nazara is unique. It is a public company, and so if Nitish said something that got you excited, well, you have a dollar. You have a way to express that intent. So Nitish, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We really appreciate it. And I'm very, very excited personally about what is to come for Nazara. And I'm excited for a repeat conversation in a few years.
Super. Thank you, Jason, for having me.
Thanks, Nitish. Appreciate it.